Okay, we are live, Instagram, Zoom, and on Facebook. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me and us. So today's topic, in case you hadn't noticed, 2020 has been a pretty crazy, nutso year.
Wow.
So this is going to be this is going to be what we call 10 for 20. 10 lessons, reflections, ideas that I put together, which I think we need to investigate when looking back at this crazy year, which we're going to be looking back at many, many times on the year 2020. Just the number 2020 is going to mean so much to so many people. So much. There is an idea in Judaism called making or taking a cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of your soul. That's a very Jewish idea. And what that basically means is that at certain times, certain intervals, certain points in our life, we stop and we reflect upon what's happened and we take a personal, spiritual accounting of what has happened and how it influenced us, why, where, and a lot of other questions. And this is a very Jewish idea. And sometimes it could be fun and sometimes it could be painful and challenging, but it's a necessity. And what better time? Here we are right at the end of December 2020, about to move into 2021. Let's stop for just a moment and give some kind of personal reflection on what has happened. Let's make and take our own cheshbon hanefesh, because everyone agrees it's been nuts. But that's not sufficient. We've got to break it down and maybe see some kind of positives, some lessons, some reflections that we can glean so that this year isn't just like, more funny videos and memes and discussion of, masks, gloves, and other household items. If I were to use one statement, one phrase that I think really summarizes what this year did for everyone, I would call 2020 the great equalizer. The great equalizer. We all felt we were in the same boat. The rich and the poor, the young and the old. No matter where you were, everyone seems to have kind of been dealing with this stress, this challenge, this craziness, and it's affected the entire world. I mean, everyone felt it. I felt connected to videos I was watching of people walking around Italy or France or Russia, right? I don't think since the Second World War, but I think even more than the Second World War, has this affected the entire planet. Now, there's going to be a premise that I'm going to be loading into everything I'm going to tell you today, and that is, this is not a coincidence, okay? This is my personal belief. Nothing that happens in this world, especially something of such a large, epic proportions like this COVID and all the resulting mishigas, insanity that's come from it, this is not a coincidence. We Jews believe that nothing happens in this world without God creating it and, as it were, giving it his stamp of approval. And therefore, there has to be just a little bit of us that gets beyond the memes and funny videos and irritations, like, what really came out of this? What's the result of this? Has there been any change? And if you leave 2020 the same way you went into 2020, there's a problem. It should have affected you, and I'm sure everyone watching and everyone has felt such a big thing. So the great equalizer, we've all felt this together. The entire world felt in a rather challenging way, but a tremendous achdut, a tremendous unity from this idea. I also want to point out that there is something which we can be grateful for, and it may seem trivial, but it's not. There's an idea in Judaism, we see it many times in life, that God puts the refuah before the makkah, which is a fancy way of saying that God puts in the healing before the disease comes. And that doesn't just mean the healing of the disease. I mean, the fact that we have technology to cure this today, when 100 years, 200 years ago, maybe we wouldn't have had it, definitely at this speed. But the fact that not only the healing itself, meaning the vaccine, which God willing will be very, very curative for this disease, this virus, but also a lot of other things, you know. I mean, I know a lot of people who were left alone at home, and if it wasn't for social media, and if it wasn't for Zoom, I mean, I know we're all sick of it already, but you know what? Without it, people would have been tucked away, completely alone. It's not sufficient. As I'm going to talk to you, people really need live contact. It's going to be one of the 10 things we're going to talk about. But what a blessing that at least we had it. At least people had some way. This is evidence of God putting the refuah, the healing, before the makkah, before the hit. In this case, the virus came. That even before we were struck with being in lockdown, shutdown, which people still are, my family's in London, they're on total lockdown right now with this new, more contagious strain that has come out. The fact that I have the ability to talk to my parents every single day on FaceTime is a tremendous blessing, okay? That really is something very, very important. I know many people whose mental health, I mean, we spoke about physical health, but one thing, this is not one of the 10, but I guess it's part of all of them, we realize the importance of mental health. I mean, many people would unfortunately poo-poo it. Yeah, if you're feeling okay, you're okay, get over it. But mental health is such an important part of who we are. Judaism puts so much emphasis, not just on physical health, how you eat, how to take care of your body, which is important as well, but also your mental health, okay? So, cheshbon nefesh. I also want to point out the importance of a smile. Right? Just seeing somebody and having them smile at you. You know, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that a person has to be having mekabelet kol adam b'sever panim yafot. When you see a person, you should smile, because your face isn't yours, right? I mean, I looked in the mirror for a couple of minutes this morning when I was brushing my teeth, you know, and washing my face, and when I used to brush my hair, but I would smile, you know, and it makes you feel good, right? And then suddenly, we realized that we used to go out, give people that smile, and now our faces are covered up. People are just walking around anonymously, because our only mode of expression that we give off how we're feeling is not our hand or our knee or our foot, it's our face. And the face was covered, besides for the eyes. What a terrible thing this was for so many people. And hopefully when the masks come off, which God willing will happen, I think the masks came on by no coincidence at Purim. At Purim time, that's when really we all started to wear masks, not a coincidence of Purim itself. And by Purim, I predict the masks will be coming off again, God willing, if not sooner. Okay? And one thing we should realize is how important a smile is for another person. How important, and even for ourselves, you know. Okay, so let's start with the 10 things which I've gleaned from this past year as part of a cheshbon nefesh. And a lot of this is based upon, I mean, as a rabbi, I get a tremendous amount of phone calls and emails and WhatsApp messages and texts and Facebook messages and comments on my YouTube videos. So I hear a lot from a lot of people, but there's certain underlying things that really connect everyone. Number one, I realized this year, which I knew but was really defined for me, is how fragile people really are. I mean, people are walking around happy and smiling, you know, and we see on social media this unreal world, but underneath, not that deep underneath, people are really fragile and very close to being in an emotional, psychological, spiritual crisis. I had questions from people who, God believers, non-God believers, atheists, and everyone really was broken, whether themselves being affected by it. Everyone at this point, especially the Jewish community, knows someone who, at least knows someone who was affected terribly. We had a very good friend, a neighbor, who went through a terrible, thank God he's fine now, reaction to this virus. And it affected him in a terrible way. And we were like, wow, this is a real wake-up call, you know. And his family were such a bright, happy, lovely family, broken, right? Of seeing their father in hospital. He wasn't even intubated, right? He just had the mask on, the oxygen mask. But a terrible thing, how fragile people are. And it's always been there. Don't think, oh, this virus created it. People are fragile. And I'll tell you personally, and this is the personal lesson I've received. You may not relate to this, but it is true for me. I love to tell jokes. And sometimes, rightly or wrongly, in many cases wrongly, I tell jokes at people's expense, you know? And I used to be like, oh, it's just a joke. don't be such a snowflake. But jokes I used to make before Corona, I come from a world where we like to roast people, that's British humor. I'm always roasting and, doing this. But people have become very fragile. I'm very careful. The jokes I make about people, the comments and the statements, I think twice. I used to just shoot from the lip, but I kind of gave up on that. I'm a lot more careful than I used to be. And I don't just say, it's a joke. People are really in a terrible state. So that's one lesson. People are fragile. And even after this crisis, and it will pass, God willing, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but I'm going to remember this, right? A little bit more sensitivity to people's emotional needs is definitely very important. Number 2 is people need love. They really do. And when I say love, I mean love in a number of ways. Emotional care, but also physical, right? The fact that we're not able to hug people, all right? And I'm a big hugger. I'm careful who I hug, but I'm a big hugger. And for me, I meet someone, I slap my hand and shake, and say that was taken away. And thank God I still have my family, although, I have teenage daughters always like, don't touch me, leave me alone. But, I don't care, I attack them anyway. But people who are alone and just greeting a person with this elbow bump that suddenly came into fashion, right? Which I think is a good thing, at least it's something. People need emotional contact, but they need physical contact as well. It's a really a major part of the power of touch and the sacred nature of what a touch is, let alone a kiss, has really shown us how important that part. I mean, we just throw it around. Hey, how you doing? The bro hug, which every rabbi gives nowadays to people. I don't give it to women, but I give it to men, And women I always give virtual hugs to. But suddenly this idea of not being able to be in physical contact, how important physical contact is for people. It's so crucial, right? The power of touch. In Judaism, we speak a lot about it. How important touch is. Words are important. Faces are important, right? Your face, as we said, is Reshut Rabim. It belongs to the public domain, said the rabbis, right? You don't even look at your face much, but everyone else has to look at your face the entire day. How you give off your face, right? The smile you give to someone is so important. I can give you examples where it's almost life-saving. I know it sounds like an exaggeration. I could tell you many stories of people I know who say that someone gave them a smile and it changed their entire day and therefore their life. People need love. I want to mention over here something about dating, relationships, and marriage. Most of the people I deal with are early married or getting married. I performed a number of weddings, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I have a lot to say on weddings as well. I performed a few Corona weddings that I'm going to get to in a moment. But I deal with people who are dating. I have a friend of mine who's a divorcee, a close friend. And I was talking to him recently. He's like, I want to get married now. And I said, I won't tell you his name. We'll call him David. It wasn't his name. And I said to him, but you were dating this fantastic girl a year ago. And she was successful and wonderful. And you had a good relationship, right? What happened with her? Why are you still... And you know what he said to me? Something very profound. I've heard this from few people. He said, that was before Corona, right? I was like, what, BC? Like, you dated a BC? He goes, yeah, I dated a BC. I says, what's the difference? He goes, I've changed. I used to be a lot more choosy, and I had certain aspirations and priorities in life before Corona, and now that we're in it, I realized that I was being too fussy and I was being too touchy, and really what wasn't okay for me BC before Corona is actually okay for me DC during Corona. And I want to find someone else. I don't want to be alone. I felt very, very lonely. And so I said, reach out, because she's already in a serious relationship, So he'll find someone else, God willing. And everyone here who wants to find someone should as well, God willing, in 2021. But the importance and the change that many of us made in our priorities, I think, and the acceptance and meaning in life has changed drastically for a lot of people. In many cases, it's a good thing. It's a shame that it took this for that realization to come. People need love and they need company. Okay, so it's physical, it's emotional, it's psychological. There's a lot of layers over here, and people have to dig deep into themselves and find meaning of what they're really all about. Okay, number 3 is related to that. And number 3 is something which I had to deal with a lot over the past year, because I had a lot of frustrations, obviously, like everyone else. I mean, people had it much worse than me, so I'm very grateful, and gratitude is a major part of my life. I try to make it. But The word over here, which I received from one of my spiritual advisors, which will be number 4, but we're still on number 3. And number 3 is acceptance of situations we find ourselves in. You know, many people are type A, large type A or small type A, like to be in control of their lives. And suddenly they lost control. And something that we all had to accept was acceptance. Right? Being able to accept the situation, because you couldn't change it. We couldn't cure it. We couldn't deal with going outside. You can't even walk into a store without a mask on, which we'll talk about as well in a moment. But the idea of acceptance is so important, accepting what you're in. So I went to one of my spiritual advisors. I've been in touch with them over the year. You know, I have someone I go to for many, many spiritual and emotional and psychological questions. He's not a rabbi, interesting enough. He's a furniture salesman, an optically great one. But he is a spiritual master. And I went to visit him, and he took from the shelf, when I was going through some of my frustrations and challenges, and he took a siddur off his shelf, which he uses every day. And on the inside, there's a piece of paper that was stuck, that was, you know, fastened down via scotch tape. And he said, I say this prayer every single day and have done for years. He's actually a, recovering alcoholic, although he hasn't drunk in, 40 years. But he's, constantly working on himself. He really does. And he read for me the acceptance prayer from the AA book, the Alcoholics Anonymous book, from page 417. And he reads it every single day, if not more. I'm going to read a bit of it to you because there's a lot of tremendous wisdom over here. And he said, acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I'm disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity, oh, what a great thing that would be, until I accept that person, place, thing, or that situation as being exactly the way it's supposed to be at this moment. Right? It's defining what acceptance is. It takes a lot of work. This is not an overnight exercise. Nothing, says the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake, which is how I started off this class. It happens for a reason. Until I can accept my alcoholism or overeating or put whatever your thing is over there, I could not stay sober unless I accept life completely on life's terms. I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world, which we don't have control over, as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. And he read that to me and said, you need to get God in your life. And he was right. Acceptance of situations, things that we couldn't tolerate before, we realize, and it was demonstrated very clearly, we're not in control. Okay, number 4 is related to number 3. I guess there's a specific order when I wrote this all down. We need a spiritual advisor. Everyone needs someone to go to for spiritual advice. And family is good, but it's not perfect. You need someone outside, someone who's going to give you honest, fair, and good feedback. I have this guy I go to, a very, very special individual, and just hearing his voice makes me feel good, But you need a rabbi, a rebbe, and a therapist. I don't care. But you need someone who's going to give you fair and honest feedback. I'm not talking about friends. Friends are really important, right? People are going to cheer you up and be there for you and rah-rah and all the rest of it. But it's not just all what friends. Friends are also meant to give you honest feedback as well if they really are friends. But you need a spiritual advisor. Someone's going to take care of your soul. You have a doctor take care of your body and a car mechanic take care of your car. But we all need spiritual advice at some point, right? Whether we're believers or not, everyone needs to tap into that part of their personality. And this year showed a lot of people how important that is. People came to me with questions this year. I mean, if it were a graph, right, how much the amount of information I was getting and requests and talks and conversations I was having online, right, it really, really went up. People need that. And you need to be there for people. This really was a year of givers and takers. And for some of us, we were lucky enough to be able to remain givers. And for many people, they just weren't in that world and just had to take. But you really want to be a giver. That's really the essence of what we're trying to be in this world. Which leads us to number 5. And that is, I think that this year taught me and people I spoke to, and really if you think about it, that people are really alone. And alone, I want to just define, this is a whole talk in of itself, what being alone means. Alone doesn't just mean you are physically, geographically alone. It may be part of it. But I know people who sit alone and feel as though they have a lot of people who are together with them. And I know people who are surrounded by people and yet feel very lonely. Okay, so lonely is not good. But there are people who really are alone, and the importance of checking in with people, not even just for their, emotional needs, also their physical needs, right? People are alone. I'm stuck with my family who wanted to kill me at various points during this past year. I can't even imagine, right? Or I can, unfortunately. People really are alone. I'll just make a shout out to my mother, I think, who's watching right now. She should live and be well, who I try to call every single day. She has an elderly neighbor next door, right? A woman with, I think all her kids are dead. Maybe one granddaughter is alive who lives far away. And my mother made food for and still does every single Shabbat. And as I tell my mother, I'm greatly impressed with that. Because my mother's got enough on her head, you know what I'm saying? But to add this, and I think the giving aspect of this creates love. But checking with people who normally we didn't take notice of, suddenly we're like, wow, I think there's people in need around me. People became aware of things that they normally, naturally weren't aware of pre-2020, right, before COVID-19 came to hit us, okay? Number 6. This may sound a little weird to you, but it's the opposite of what I've been saying up to now, boundaries. Finding boundaries around ourselves. I'll give an example of this. Some of you may not like this. I'm just warning ahead of time, but you know what? If I can't, push the buttons a little bit. You may have realized we had this big and still do have this big thing, mask and non-mask wearers. You may have heard of arguments and fights. You may have seen and I've gone through various phases in this. I'm saying, at some point I became I can't believe they're wearing masks. And other times like, I cannot believe they're actually wearing a mask. And why are you wearing a mask? And why are you wearing it? I mean, I've been through like all of us, if you're honest. And, it became for some people a religion. And I'm not putting it down. I don't want to hear your views on this right now. It doesn't interest me. All right? You have the mask wearers, the non-mask wearers. You have to do it. You don't have to do it. But one thing that occurred to me was, and I heard this actually from my advisor, he said the importance of boundaries. People started to enmesh themselves in other people's lives and get angry and get frustrated. I sat in synagogue many times. Someone had a mask, didn't have a mask on. And I was like, you know what? I can't control other people. I just kind of did my own thing. And I realized that I'm here and I've got to just kind of like do my own thing. Right? I saw arguments and fights. I'm actually on the board of my synagogue. Right? Because I'm like the assistant rabbi, unofficial of my synagogue. When the rabbi's away, I take over, which happens a lot over the past year. His mother lives in LA. She's a Holocaust survivor. So I took over a bunch of times, had to deal with a lot of things. And people get really, really angry really quickly. I realized that this year as well, boundaries. One of the things that happened over here is like, I can't, people are too enmeshed and there has to be boundaries and a certain acceptance about other people's actions and behaviors as well. I can't control other people and I definitely can't change other people as well. Number 7, although I think this is part of another few of them actually, there's some overlap, but fear of the unknown, right? We go through life and we kind of know what we're doing. We've got to work, we have kids. I mean, things come up here and there. Suddenly, everything was Purimized. V'nahafach, it was all turned upside down, And we were all shaken to our core. I mean, everyone at some point freaked out, at least once. I freaked out a bunch of times, But there was a great fear of the unknown. Now, I'm not going to say too much more on this because I want to tie this into something I'm going to say in 2 points' time, which is the importance of emunah, faith in God, which I'm going to get to in a moment. But how important fear is in people's lives. People live with a constant fear of what's happening, what's not happening. I don't know, but I'm going to take a bet that many people who are into, trying to discern the future through astrology or mediums or this kind of thing, there was an uptick in that. Again, I don't know. This is a conjecture, but people want to know what the future holds. There's a natural desire that we have. There's a fear of the unknown, and the future is unknown. That's why one of the reasons we put our faith and trust in God. Interestingly, the Torah is against trying to portend and to discern the future through mediums and such means. Why? There's different, some say because it's all nonsense, and some say it's true, but you should focus on the here and now. And living in today became a big challenge for a lot of people. What's going to happen tomorrow? And people who live like that, I found, were mentally in a terrible state because we don't know what the future holds. and we're not expected to. And we're meant to live, as we just read about acceptance speech today, in the now. And that became a big, big challenge for a lot of people. Number 8, I've got a lot to say on. Number 8 is perspectives on life. Now, I want to talk about weddings for a minute over here. I am, again, I'm talking personally as a rabbi. I'm sure we all have stories and things we can talk about. But this is one glimpse and one big change I saw. And dare I say it, I think it was a good change. I've performed, at this point in my career, over 20 years being a rabbi, on average, I don't know, 10 weddings a year or so, you know, once every month or 6 weeks when things were, you know, maybe 150 weddings or something. I don't know. So I've seen all types of weddings. And there's one thing over the past 20 years of me performing weddings is they were getting bigger and not smaller. People were going into debt over the price of weddings. People were getting into big fights. I saw a number happen this year of let alone dating couples, engagements, people who had wedding dates and halls booked that broke up over the financial and the stress and pressure of making weddings. You know, I'm not going to tell people how to spend their money. And God willing, I'm going to, you know, throw weddings. And weddings should be nice and beautiful. And yes, even lavish. But they were getting out of control. I mean, it started to become not a celebration, but more a keeping up with the Joneses, or in our case, the Cohens or the Goldsmiths. You know what I'm saying? I really think it was getting out of hand. Now, I'm talking weddings. You can apply that to anything else, right? But people were going into big debt in order not to seem as though they're making it. I understand it. I'm not putting it down, right? We wait for this day more than our kids do. We want them to have big and beautiful lab. We want to give them this big, beautiful send-off. I think it was getting out of control. And I performed many big weddings over the years. I mean, I performed weddings that were the price of my house, you know? Actually, I performed bar and bat mitzvahs. You could throw that into the mix as well. I performed a bat mitzvah of one of my funders a few years ago. I mean, I don't think it was less than, you know, $1 million for a bat mitzvah. Okay? Now, this is a very wealthy individual. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. If you have the money, geh gesund. Go right ahead. I'm not judging you. It's for the other people who can't afford it, who try to live up to a certain standard. They're just not at. And then came Corona. And I started to do weddings, and people pushed off the weddings because they didn't want a small wedding, you know? But a number of people I know, and I commend them, did small weddings. Very small weddings. I mean, weddings that were... I performed weddings in tents, right? You can look on Facebook, see me in a little tent, right? Next to a massive castle behind me. I did weddings in backyards, you know, with 15 people present. We had a minyan, a couple of family members, everyone socially distanced, and everyone else on Zoom. I'm telling you, and I really mean, I know these couples well. I spoke to them before, during, and after. They all told me they were delighted they didn't push it off. They wanted to get married. This is what they wanted from their lives, and it didn't take away a single thing. Because after it's all done and dusted, basically it's a 5-hour party. I'm sorry to put down the wedding. Weddings are important. We should celebrate. But there was this contraction in weddings, and I don't think it took away too much. Okay, it's sad that many family members who were abroad couldn't come to these weddings, but the financial gains and the perspective, you know, it was a good thing. And I want this to carry on to the future. I just don't know if it's going to. I'm scared it's going to creep up to where it was before. This crazy bat mitzvah wedding thing, just totally out of control. I think there's better places, excuse me for saying this, to park your money than in an extremely ostentatious wedding. It's my opinion. This is my class. If you have your own opinion, you can make your own video. Number 9. I mentioned this already. This is faith in God. I found people needed to put their belief and faith in something. You know, I heard this a lot over the past year of 2020 of people telling me that, you know, they didn't really believe in God before. I mean, many people were angry with God and asked me questions about that as well. And you hear it. We believe this happened for a reason and a purpose. And ultimately, everything that God does is for the good. You got to try to find something good that comes out of it, even though there's extreme challenge that came with this equalizer of a virus that kind of put us all, rich, poor, young, old, China, France, Russia, everywhere in it together, you know? But we realize that faith in God isn't for when things are going well. You don't need faith in God then. I mean, we need it then. You need it when things are challenging. However, You're only going to have it when things are challenging, when you work on it, when things are going well. So when things are going good, that's when we need to build our relationship, our faith in God. And there's ways to do it, you know. I mean, me personally, I know the amount of Torah I studied went down. I just didn't have presence of mind. But my prayers went up. I wasn't such a great prayer. You know, my ADD kicks in and I kind of like finish quickly. I'll tell you something. One thing which happened to me personally was I found I was praying a lot more and a lot more seriously. Because, you know, somehow I had something to pray for, someone to pray for, family, friends, you know. And I took my prayer. My prayers changed. Oh, by the way, as a side point, did you notice that your dreams changed? Suddenly my dreaming and my dreams, and I got so many calls and emails on this. You know, I can tell by what's happening in the world, by the amount of views I get on my videos that I put out. I do quite a few. And my dreams videos, they usually reach the thousands. The amount of the deep dreams I was having during this past year were epic. I will mention that this is actually spoken about in some Jewish literature, that before Mashiach comes, prophecy is going to return to everyone, and dreams are a form, a mild form, but a form of nevuah, of prophecy. So maybe that's connected, but that was definitely part of it. But building faith in God and prayer for me really took on a whole new format. I mean, I pray all the time. You know, I'm saying it's probably the most common mitzvah that most of us, you know, especially observant Jews do. You're just praying, but suddenly it became more serious, and that's definitely a good thing. And finally, I realized how optimistic people are, you know. Actually, this is not final. I have something else to say after this. But I realized that people are like, you know, 2021's coming. You know, it's coming and it's going to be better. I think there's a general optimism that people live by. They complain, they fetch, they go through challenges. But ultimately, I believe the general human condition for people who aren't, you know, suffering from major things are generally optimistic. Even people, I saw people who went through tremendous challenges and they came out of it, or even during it, amazingly, and they kind of like move on. So I really got to see the optimistic nature of people out there. You know, people you ask most people, are we going to get through this? And they're like, no, that's it, we're all dead. You know, they'll say it's going to take time. You know, New York City, it's going to take a year or two, but it's going to come back, you know, because right now it's a shambles. But the general optimism, and I'm going to add a number 11, a bonus, if you will, a punchline to my talk, and the importance of laughter, right? I mean, I'll be honest with you, we're all getting these videos and memes. Some of them are not funny at all, but some of them really made me laugh. How important the power of laughter is. And I've mentioned this story before from the Gemara of two people who were walking through, one person, a Rabbi Baroka, says the Gemara, was walking through the marketplace. And he had a revelation. And he saw Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi. And he went over to him and said, who here is a Ben Olam Haba? Which is a nice way of saying, who is spiritually great in this marketplace? It was full of people. And Elijah the prophet pointed at two guys and said, those two guys, they are Ben Olam Haba. They got this whole spirituality thing down. Mwah! Gorgeous. So he approached them. You know, he wanted to know what they do. He said, what do you guys do? Could they have been doctors? Possibly. Lawyers? Unlikely. I'm joking, take it easy. And he said to them, what do you guys do? And they said, we're comedians. We tell jokes. We see people are upset, depressed. We tell them, we lift up their spirits. And if we're lucky, they'll throw us a coin. And that's how we make a living, right? We tell jokes, you know? And according to the Gemara, Elijah the prophet came back to earth to point out to this Rabbi Baroka. And it was printed the Gemara to tell us that if you have the ability to make other people laugh and cheer them up, you're Ben Olam or Bat Olam Haba. Right? You're part of the next world. You're living a spiritual Olam Haba, next world experience in this world. The power of cheering a person up and causing them to smile or laugh, especially when they're down, and the general consensus is that we were all down during this year, is a great and amazing thing. So those are my 10 plus reflections and lessons from this year. That's our Cheshbon HaNefesh. Just to summarize some of them, people are fragile. That's always there. We have to be very aware of that. People need love, physical, emotional love, and how important, and never take that for granted. Acceptance of situations we cannot change, like we saw from the Alcoholics Big Book. Need to check in with people, especially people who live alone, and just reach out to them, say hi. You know, we can all, it's so simple now with social media. Just check in with them. finding boundaries around ourselves, other people. Don't enmesh yourself too much. Fear of the unknown. People live with that, living day to day, trying to get it right just today. Perspectives on life, the amount of money we were spending on nonsense. And suddenly things that weren't so important to us suddenly are. Faith in God always needs to be worked at. And it's going to be good. So God willing, as we move forward, although we're in the Jewish year for a few months already, God willing, the year should be good. And 2021 as well should bring with it health, success, and blessings and only goodness. And we should never forget not just the funny jokes from this past year, but also the lessons that most of us, I know, have downloaded. And there should be an appreciation, an acceptance for all of our futures as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. And God willing, I'll see you all next Tuesday night. And next Wednesday at 12 p.m, we'll be talking about narcissism. That's going to be our topic next Wednesday. Thank you all very, very much. I'll see you all then.